Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me pretty good? All right. Plus, since I'm a judge, I'm used to talking really loud, so don't worry. If I get too loud, just tell me to shh a little bit. You can do that here, just not in the courtroom. I am honored to be here. My name is Judge L Dawson. I'm the judge right down the street at the East Cleveland Municipal Court, and I've been on the bench for 5 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years as a criminal defense attorney. So when we talk about how to change lives and the advancements of technology, I go all the way back to the basics in human interaction and how we must change and how we must evolve so that we're being the absolute best that we can be. But I would like to say one thing that's interesting. All of the wonderful talks that I've heard thus far really focusing on the benefits of technology, and it's amazing how every now and then you'll get that glitch. I tried to email my presentation several times. For some reason it didn't go, but with the power of that iPad, I sat back there and created this short version of my 3-hour presentation. So maybe I'm saving everybody. And so we have the short version, but I was able to do that sitting right in my seat. So it just shows you how wonderful technology is. So not only am I a judge in the city of East Cleveland, but I am a yoga teacher. But let me tell you how I made it to that path. As a defense attorney, I spent a lot of time winning cases. And I must admit, I was pretty good. I go in, talk to the jury, mesmerize the jury, and sometimes walk out of there with not guilties on a lot of criminal cases. But there came a time where that wasn't sitting well with me because I noticed that some of the guys and the ladies that I would defend, they weren't really changing their lives. Now, I would try to do what I could to talk with them briefly, say, hey, you know what? We're going to go in, we're going to do our best, but you have to change, you have to make better decisions so that you don't need me to represent you. But oftentimes, as soon as they won that case, that stuff just went out the other side of the ear and it was over. So I tried to figure out what can I do to really affect change in the community. So I wrote a book called The Legal Matrix, How the System is Controlling Your Life. And I said, you know what? Everyone's going to read this book. They're going to read about the legal system and crime is going to cease in the city of Cleveland. Well, it didn't happen. One of the reasons is I realized that the people who need to read the book, they weren't out reading books. They're, sometimes committing crime. So I did not get to the demographic that I intended to reach. But then I created a workbook. And I said, okay, I know what I'm going to do with this workbook. I'm going to go into the high schools and I'll teach all the high school students about crime and how to avoid negative interaction with the legal system. And that'll do it. We'll fix the criminal justice system. And that's kind of working, but it's a very slow process. I go into the schools every week when I'm not on the bench to make sure that I'm teaching young people on how to avoid negative interaction with the legal system. But I'm still a defense attorney at that time, and I believe this was the turning point of my career. I had a young man who was charged with a robbery offense, and allegedly he went into a home, had a mask on, guns and everything involved, and robbed a group of people. Now it was interesting because as attorneys we get what's called discovery, and that's where we are exchanging information with the prosecutor so we'll know what we're dealing with. So during the discovery process, I'm reading all these statements and they're saying things like, we knew it was X, Y, and Z. We knew it was him. We recognized his walk, his talk. So we're in trial and the people are testifying. They're saying, yeah, we knew it was him because we know him. We recognized the voice. We could see his mannerisms. But all along, he's saying that he didn't do it. And of course, because he had on a mask, you could say you recognize someone's voice, but there's no 100% guarantee. So we go through trial and I eventually won that case. But I really felt funny about it because the evidence seemed to be overwhelming that it was my client, even though I was able to convince the jury through the lack of exact evidence or exact science or technology, as we've been talking about, that it was my client. So we win the case. I talk to him. I tell him, hey, you have to change your life, go in a different direction. And he's telling me, Judge Dawson, don't worry, but at the time it was Attorney Dawson, I'm going to make some changes. And I'll tell you, it was probably a month, maybe 2 later, I found out that my client was killed by the same people that he robbed. So while I thought that I did him justice by helping him win his case, maybe he would have been safer in prison. Maybe he would have lived longer had we received a guilty verdict in that particular case. And that was the point where I said, as a defense attorney, I really need to do something different. I need to help affect change so that I'm just not winning cases, but I'm trying to help people change their mindset. Fast forward, I figure I want to go back to East Cleveland where I was born and raised, went to all the schools, and I run for judge, and I'm elected. So I bring with me this movement called cycle breakers. because my goal is to break negative cycles in the community. So here's one of the slides. I am a cycle breaker. A cycle breaker is, and that there's, I used to use that, but what I'd like you to focus on is you have to seek, you have to learn, commit, and stay in the game. So here are the slides I want you to see. The first step of being a cycle breaker is you have to identify the cycle or the need for change. And here's the great thing about being a cycle breaker and how it relates to all of us. It's not just crime. It's everything that we deal with. So say, for instance, I know because all of you have come out this Saturday morning, you're probably the best students and the best professors around. But let's say that studying is one of your issues. I don't like to study. I don't really get at it when I'm in my dorm room. I need that extra motivation. That's a cycle that needs to be changed. Let's say that maybe you want to stop smoking. Maybe you want to eat better. Maybe you want to come to Judge Dawson's yoga class. Anything that you recognize in your life that you want to improve upon, that may be a cycle. And then we can go on and talk about generational cycles of poverty and crime and things like that. And I do that in my longer presentations. But the bottom line is we all have areas that we want to improve because we want to be the best we can be. In fact, we wouldn't be at this conference hearing about all this wonderful technology if there wasn't a thirst for improvement. So we all want to break cycles, and sometimes that cycle can be the same old technology. So the first thing you have to do to be a cycle breaker is identify the cycle. The next thing you have to do is commit to breaking the cycle. Because oftentimes we say, you know what, I want to change, I'm going to be a better person, I'm going to study harder, I'm going to stop smoking, but it's hard to make that commitment. It really is, and it goes across the board. And then if you think about what I do as a judge, I see it all the time. If you've had a family history of, let's say, domestic violence, and anything like that, any of those things can really dampen, if not destroy, your ability to be innovative, your ability to spark any type of positive conversation or change when you're dealing with that negative environment. So in my court, I see a lot of domestic violences, I see a lot of assaults, and when you see that as a cycle in my generations, in my family, in my history, it's hard to break that cycle. You'll stand in front of me, you'll come to my programs, I do a program, I do the one at the high school and then I do one at court every Monday night. And you'll come to the program, you may walk out feeling great. I'm going to change, I'm going to be a better person. And then you walk in the house in the middle of chaos. So it's hard to commit to being a cycle breaker, and that's why commitment is so important. The next one is that you have to gather the tools that are necessary to break the cycle. So think about it. If you say that you want to stop smoking, let's use that. And you say, okay, that's the cycle, I'm going to break it, I'm going to commit to it because I'm just tired of spending that extra money on cigarettes and I need to save my money to pay off my student loans, if that could ever happen. So you're going to commit to it, right? But now you have to figure out, well, I need some tools. Because if you're committed and you want to break the cycle, but you don't have the tools to do it, the commitment won't last. So maybe you need some help. Maybe we need to speak with one of the professors with these excellent, amazing programs and all this technology on how to interact differently, how to avoid going to the store to buy the cigarettes, whatever it is. Maybe you need the patch, I don't know. But you may need the tools to break the cycle. So take that back to my court. So I can't just tell a young man or a young lady, hey, you need to stop selling drugs. You need to stop that because you're going to end up in jail over and over and over again. I need to help them get tools. Maybe it's education. Maybe it's some mentoring, something positive in their life so that they can actually work toward breaking that cycle. Because without the tools, you can't do it. And then the last one is you can't give up when the going gets tough. If you really want to be a cycle breaker, you have to be able to stick in there. And think about it, with any of the advancements in technology, if any of our wonderful, intelligent men and women quit the first time they ran up against a brick wall, we wouldn't have the iPhone, we wouldn't have the iPad, we wouldn't have the projector system. So when the going gets tough, when people don't believe in you, you have to keep going to break that cycle. And those are the elements of being a cycle breaker. So let me tell you how I got into yoga. Now, in my original presentation, it would have been amazing. I had all these great yoga poses, and I was going to call you up, and we were going to do tree pose together, and all these great things. But this is how I got into yoga. I was trying again through my court to figure out another way to reach people and how to really bring them into their greatest self. And I realized that meditation and yoga, that really brings a wholeness to your life that you may not be able to get in other places. So I started going to yoga classes right over here at Cleveland Yoga, right around the corner. And I realized that the meditation and just the physical practice was an escape from all the chaos that I was dealing with at the court. And I said, wow, this would be amazing for people in my city who come through my court to understand the benefits of body movement, breath control, and meditation. So I went over to Cleveland Yoga. I decided to enroll as one of the students. I received my certification, and the first thing I did was go back to court, and I stood up one day and I said, you know what? Everybody on probation has to do yoga. And they're all looking at me like, really? Okay. But the good thing about that is I'm the judge. So yes, really you do. So we had a couple of sessions in the courtroom, and it was amazing to see the faces of these young men and women after they're doing downward facing dog and all these excellent poses. And they were just amazed that they were able to really do it. So I've been really dedicated to yoga teaching. I teach every morning, Friday at 6 a.m. at Cleveland Yoga. And in fact, a really interesting thing is that at 1:30 today, I'm going over to Cleveland Yoga to teach Case Western Reserve law students who are going for a free yoga session, getting the basic general principles of yoga. So I'm moving all over the place, but the yoga is so important and so vital to being a cycle breaker in my mind, because it gives you the mentality to stay in there when the going gets tough, to commit to doing what you say you're gonna do, and there are tools involved that can help you break any cycle at all. Now, the last thing I wanna mention before I wrap up, and I'll tell you again, my presentation had it so timed out. Here's an interesting fact. So in addition to being a cycle breaker, a lot of the tools that I use to help change is coming from the basic principles of emotional intelligence. So you may have heard of that because you have an excellent emotional intelligence program here at Case. So here's a fun fact. I'm reading about emotional intelligence. I'm really getting deep into it, and I know how they apply it to corporate America and technology and things like that. And I said, wow, that's why so many people commit crimes and end up in my courtroom, because they don't know how to manage their emotions. And maybe sometimes they use the wrong emotions in the wrong situation. So I said, what can I do to bring emotional intelligence to the court? So I read about the program that you have here at Case Western Reserve. And I said, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna call the business school and I'm gonna tell them all about me, all about my mission. They're gonna jump on board and we're gonna just change the world. So I call over and say, hey, I wanna join the course for the certification in emotional intelligence. And guess what? Let me come here free, because we're gonna do an excellent job together. And so I wrote this letter, made the calls, and they said, well, you know, Judge Dawson, we really like what you're talking about. We don't really see the application yet because we're thinking from a business perspective, so we won't give it to you free. But you can come, we'll give you a discounted rate. So it was wonderful. Case Western Reserve cut the tuition in half for me, and I received a certification to teach emotional intelligence. So with all of those tools, I believe that I'm able to change our world from a criminal perspective. And I'll tell you, what people don't realize is that crime travels. We see it all the time. So no matter how great we're doing with our advancements in technology and education, which we have to keep doing, we have to remember that if we forget about those who don't have the same drive as us, the same mentality, the same control over their emotions, or the ability to be a cycle breaker, that could undermine everything that we're working on. Because they could come into our environments and unfortunately change our motivation, our inspiration, or even our situations. So while you're dedicated to changing the world through technology and education, rest assured, sleep well at night, because I'm down the street trying to be a cycle breaker so that we all can rest and sleep well and change the world. Thank you so much. I'm Judge Dawson. You can visit my website, Cycle a Breaker Academy, or judgedawson.com. I have free ebooks, all types of wonderful stuff to help change the world. Thank you so much.